Hello, and welcome to a special festive Christmas special episode of Stowe Talks, our podcast which is designed to support people going through a relationship breakdown and all the challenges this brings. For those of you lucky enough to be watching on YouTube, you can see that we are decked out in Christmas jumpers especially for this. I'm Matthew Taylor.
And I'm Liza, family lawyers at Stowe Family Law. And today, as Matt said, we're talking about Christmas. So when we recorded this, Matt, it's 12 weeks till Christmas. Are you excited?
No, they're terrified. Now, I know that Christmas is sort of coming because my children have started talking extensively about their Father Christmas lists, to which my response is, come back to me in, depends how charitable I want to be. Sometimes October, sometimes November, sometimes December. I assume hysteria in your house is building in the same way.
Yeah, we had the Smith's toy catalogue come through the door this week, so they've started circling things.
We haven't had that yet, but I did get to school drop the other day, and one of the mum friends said, "Oh, the Father Christmas catalogue arrived in the post yesterday, so it's going to hit soon."
Yeah.
So, what do you think of, as family lawyers, aside from all the great stuff about Christmas, and what you enjoy? Christmas isn't always a positive thing, I think, for separating couples. So, what's the first things that you think of in the sort of professional aspect through your job when we think about Christmas?
I think Christmas is really, really tough time of year for separated couples because it is portrayed and it is a family day. Everybody gets together and you are likely to have created traditions within your family, particularly with your children, that will have been going on throughout your relationship. And all of this is going to have to be reviewed as to how it's going to work now you're separated. And I think people can get really, really hung up, particularly on the Christmas Eve and Christmas Day. And I do try to say to clients, so my dad was in the forces and he was away one Christmas when I was younger. And my mum did Christmas in March when he came back, and she put the Christmas tree up outside. She put all the decorations up.
Oh, great.
We had turkey, presents, the whole lot. And as a child, it made absolutely no difference to me whether that happened in March or on the 25th.
And I bet that must have been one of your most memorable Christmases.
Yeah. I think
brilliant.
The neighbours must have thought she was crazy. People get upset if you start putting Christmas decorations up in November, let alone March. But yeah, so I think people can get very hung up on the dates. And obviously there are, in circumstances, religious reasons why, to celebrate Christmas on the 25th of December may be particularly important in your family. But it can be celebrated and it can work really well on other days. So it's about working out how that's going to work for you. And I think people come to us often with an expectation of how Christmas will work. And there is no one fit answer. I'm sure we could both go through various different ways that our clients have managed to make Christmas work, and they would be completely different.
Yeah, and there's all sorts of things. If you get on well with your ex-partner, people do Christmas together, which is like a terrific achievement if you can get to that stage. I think that's probably the minority. If you can use that, I think what you said there is a really great example of establishing new traditions. Like, so much of what we do in family law, I think, is people wanting to maintain certainty and comfort and familiarity. And that is completely understandable. And you've got such a tradition-laden time of the year. You want to carry on those traditions as much as you can. But sometimes there's a real freedom and there's a real just a real creativity and a real benefit to children establishing new traditions. And also, if you speak to most children, would you like to have one Christmas day or two Christmas days? I think we know what they're going to say. So there's a way of going about it, but still that waking up, I won't pretend that waking up on Christmas morning, like as a dad with two young boys, like the Christmas morning thing is really special, especially for younger kids. And you've got the magic and, they're excited to see what Father Christmas has brought. That is really special. So I think it's really common, especially around this time of year, that we start to have disputes where parties can't agree Christmas. So, what are the main ways that you try and resolve issues over Christmas? And, hopefully it doesn't come to that. We can talk about court in a minute. But if it was to come to the court, what's the general kind of approach do you think that works best for Christmas?
I think it comes down to, we say this a lot, communication. It's about having that open communication with your ex-partner, setting the expectations. If you can do that, sitting down together, great. If you're not in a position, you're not in a place where that works for you at the moment, then it may be that you instruct a solicitor and you try and negotiate that through solicitors' correspondence. Or alternatively, a referral to mediation, this is a great topic to discuss at mediation. So you can sit down with somebody who's independent, who can help you sort of pick through what it is that you both want to achieve from this, which is often that you both just want to have a lovely Christmas time with the children, and it's working out how that's going to work. But definitely it's opening the communication and speaking. And if you come into it with a absolute, well, I'm having Christmas Eve and Christmas Day and there's no getting around that, you're going to put yourself in a really difficult position, and things could get really, really stressful for you.
Yeah, 100%. And I think you're right. This is the absolute best thing to take to mediation, I think. Mediation is brilliant for all sorts of things, but these sort of specific issues, and perhaps we can talk wider about specific issues in a second, but are really great, discrete aspects to talk about in mediation. If you can't sort things out outside of court, you can apply to court. You can apply for what's called a specific issue order if you don't already have an order that deals with Christmas, because you can deal with Christmas, birthdays, all these specific kind of special days, as we sort of call them as an overarching label, as part of a child arrangements order. And I think there are basically two main approaches that the courts take. Either, and what we need to remember, and for anyone who listens to a lot of these podcasts, you'll get sick of hearing us say this, is that it's from the children's perspective. What is for the benefit of the children? So it's not for the benefit of the adults. What's best for the children? And the court will generally say, well, either the kids have Christmas Eve and Christmas morning with one parent, and then there is some sort of handover 1 o'clock-ish, in the middle of the day, and they spend the rest of Christmas Day and Boxing Day with the other parent, and then it swaps each year. Or you spend the entirety of Christmas Day, Christmas Eve, the period, with one parent 1 year and with the other parent the other year. And I think that's, unless there is a specific reason why one party can't be available, you've got particular family reasons. I think that's generally the approach, isn't it, Lisa? And that's kind of the sort of the two standard approaches.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, we just said a minute ago, if you can't reach an agreement, potentially looking at court proceedings. I don't know about you, Matt, because obviously we cover different parts of the country. We've just said there's 12 weeks to go till Christmas. Would you be able to get the court to make a determination on this before Christmas this year?
I think I probably would be able to. So I'm up in the northwest. I'm Liverpool based, and I think I could probably get something in court now. But we're running up against it already. We're 29th of September at the moment. If you do my heart sort of slightly sinks when I get the emails 2 weeks before Christmas saying we can't agree Christmas, I want to go to court, because it's just so incredibly unlikely that the court's going to be able to sort it out in time. So yeah, I don't imagine you're going to be able to get much in before court, because your listings down the south are a lot harsher than ours, I think.
Yeah, I mean, it would be really tight now, and obviously by the time this episode's going to be released, we're probably going to be at the end of November.
Yeah.
By which point, actually, it is a case of you've got no other choice but to agree it. The courts are not going to get involved this year. And so when we're looking forward to future years, I think the advice would be you need to be having these discussions much earlier than when you start with than when the festive period kind of begins. They are conversations that need to be had right at the beginning of the year, really, so that you've got time to try out these different options and make an application to court if an agreement can't be reached.
Yeah.
Have you tried arbitration for any of these cases?
I haven't, but that's something you could do, absolutely. So arbitration is effectively private court proceedings. So you are hiring someone as a judge, normally a barrister or a senior solicitor, and you can make your representations to them, and they can provide a binding judgment. So that is definitely an option that you could go ahead with. If that's not something that's available to you, I think thinking ahead is the really sensible thing. If you're listening to this thinking, well, great, Matt and Lisa say, let's try and communicate it and sort it out, but I've tried that and my ex just won't budge and is saying that he or she is having the kids for the whole Christmas, end of story. Well, maybe you have to take this one on the chin this year, but start planning ahead next year. And as I said before, the general patterns, it reverses each year. So you say, well, fine, you've got the kids this year, but next year they're mine for an equivalent period of time. And that is an entirely reasonable stance to take. And if you end up in court, the chances are, subject to all the other, usual concerns and checks and things, the chances are that the judge is going to say, well, why is that not fair? So I think that's a really sensible approach. But yeah, arbitration is something that you could look at at fairly short notice. And that's something you could do with just on papers. It's such a specific issue, is that, you could get a barrister to have a look at a 3-page position statement prepared by one party, a 3-page position statement from another party, and give a determination on that basis when there are no other welfare concerns, couldn't you? It should be fairly straightforward.
So we said this was a specific issue order. What other types of circumstances would these types of orders be applied for in?
Yeah, so specific issue orders, so SIOs, which I'm going to call them so I don't stumble over my words all the time, it's a bit exactly what it says in the tin. So you're looking at these bespoke, discrete, specific issues. The common ones are around things like the special days. So Christmas is a common one. But other common issues are if there's a dispute about what school your child's going to attend, if you've got an issue about medical treatment. It can be used in relocation cases, but I think more properly they're kind of pleaded as part of a child arrangements order as well. But they're the really common ones. So school can be a really common one. And obviously we're looking at, coming up, November, December when this is being put out. January time is going to be time for school decisions for primary schools. Obviously, you've got to be looking ahead for sort of secondary school applications and things as you come to later in the year for the following year. So that's a really common application, I think. So what's your approach to those, Lisa? If you get a client come to you and say, we just can't agree on the school, I think school X, my ex thinks school Y, how do you address those?
Well, it's exactly the same really as what we just spoke about with Christmas. So we're looking at communicating, and listening, like active listening. What are their concerns? Have you visited both of the schools? What are the concerns? What are the practicalities? Is the school closer to one parent? How much time do the children spend with that parent? So I think it is a case of having that communication, but also actively listening to the other party's views, opinions, and concerns, rather than just discounting them off the bat because that's not the school that you initially thought you'd like the children to go to. If you do all of that and you research it all and you are still at loggerheads and you cannot reach an agreement, then again, mediation is a perfect opportunity to be having these discussions. And if mediation doesn't work, then again, you can try arbitration or ultimately court proceedings. But I think, again, with court proceedings, the difficulty that we have is that by the time you start to have these conversations, and, I have a child that will be going up to secondary school next year. The letters came through on the first day that they went back to year 6 to say, this is your catchment school, you need to be looking at it. The open days are in the next 6 weeks, and then you have to make a decision by the end of October. So the window is really, really tight, which means actually the likelihood of you getting a court to determine which school the child should go to in that kind of 8-week period is slim to none. So again, as you said with arbitration, it may be that it's something that you could get before an arbitrator relatively quickly. But I think you tend to know in advance whether these are issues that are going to cause difficulties, because often they would have fed into conversations perhaps throughout the relationship or since separation. So it is all about flagging up any issues that you've got and trying to have those conversations as early as possible so that you're not leaving it to the last minute and reducing your options as to how to resolve them.
Yeah, and I think when I've had clients with issues around schools, the most common, aside from where you are looking at a completely different geographical area, which is really a different case, if you are looking at your priority list of schools in a given defined geographical area that works for both, both houses the kids are at, I find that it tends to be a clash of priorities. So one parent may say, I like this school because it's Ofsted outstanding and these are only Ofsted good. So therefore, that should be the determining factor. Whereas the other parent might say, well, actually, their friends are going to the other school, or it's a smaller class size, or, it's got better arts provision if they're arty, or sports provision if they're sporty, whatever it is. And that's not to say that either approach is right or wrong. I think that the court was going to look at things more holistically. The court is not going to... What the court can't do is say that we're always going to go for an outstanding school, because the logical extension of that is that no one should ever go to a school that's anything less than Ofsted outstanding, and that's just not possible. So the court will factor that in, and of course the standard of education is incredibly important, but that is not necessarily the determining factor. But that's going to weigh in. So both parties need to understand that there are valid arguments on both sides, I think, there. And understanding your priorities, and sometimes priorities clash, and it can often be, a parenting style clash. But trying to feed those both in. And again, put yourself through the eyes of the child, which school is going to be best for your particular child. The other factor that can make things a bit difficult is obviously there are some schools who are better if the child's got special educational needs, and that's a slightly different factor. And then in my sort of experience, you might disagree. I think those factors will slightly take precedence, because it goes to a wider range of what the court's got to look at, which is the welfare checklist, which includes educational needs, but also includes health needs, also includes the wishes and feelings of the child. So you've got to look at all the factors in the round. So when I have had clients who've said to me, well, this is the better school, they should go there, it's not necessarily as cut and dried as that.
No, it's not. And it's really interesting that you went to the welfare checklist then and the wishes and feelings of the child, because often, particularly if we're looking at secondary school children, they're at that age 10, 11 cusp. They're going to have opinions. And it may be that you want to canvass those in a safe environment as well, so that those can feed into your decision making or into the decision making process. And you might want to consider something like child inclusive mediation,
absolutely,
where the wishes and feelings of the child can be canvassed really safely by somebody who's independent. Just because the child wants something doesn't mean that that's what the parents have to do, or indeed that's what the court will do. But it may be that really helps to focus the parents' discussion as well.
Yeah, and child inclusive mediation, just to kind of, as a quick explainer, for anyone who's not familiar with that, when I mention it to clients, people say, well, hang on, my kid shouldn't have to choose in the room between mum and dad as to what they want. It's not how it works. The mediator, a properly qualified child inclusive mediator, will speak to the child separately. And the child will say, I want you to say this, I don't want you to say that. So the mediator can keep certain confidences. So it can be a really good way for a child to get across views in a way that, is not going to, because they won't want to upset mum and dad. Kids will, with the best will in the world, they often say things that each parent wants to hear, not in any negative way, not because they're lying, but because they want to be nice to their mum and their dad, and they want to, keep everyone happy. This allows a way to kind of filter through that, I think.
Yeah.
So just a final point, and it's similar sort of ways of resolving these matters, but the other thing that comes up with specific issue orders is sometimes holidays and being able to take a child abroad. Is there any kind of particular extra factors that need to be considered there, Lisa, compared to the sort of the other things that we've talked about already?
I think you just have to be really reasonable when it comes to holidays. If the other parent is having overnight contact with the children, and they want to take the children on a family holiday during school holidays to Spain, for example, if you can't reach an agreement and you end up making an application to court, the judge is more than likely to allow the children to go on a holiday, because, as we say, it's child focused, it's what's in the best interest of the children. The children will really enjoy the holiday. Obviously, it's slightly different depending on location. If you're looking to go somewhere that's slightly more dangerous, and particularly, for example, we've got the war in Ukraine. If you suddenly decided that you wanted to go on holiday for whatever reason to Ukraine, maybe that you've got family over there, it may be slightly easier to convince a judge that wouldn't be in the children's best interests. But predominantly with holidays, provided you've got a pattern of contact or arrangements where you're having regular overnight contact, a holiday, there's usually no issue with holidays. And to be seen, you've got to be really careful about withholding consent in those circumstances where you can seem to be a bit unreasonable.
Yeah, I think so. There can be, and what you said about the existing contact patterns feeding into it is really key. If someone has only ever had 1 or 2 nights overnight, and that's a fairly recent arrangement, suddenly having a 2-week holiday is going to be too much. Having a week holiday may well be too much. So in that case, you'd advise clients to start, well, let's just do 3 or 4 nights. Let's start. Let's do it's a gradual build up. But if they've had half the school holidays before, there's no reason why it shouldn't be a full week. For anyone who's trying to negotiate that, be reasonable. Say to the parent who's maybe got some reticence, because a lot of it can stem from fear. And don't forget the emotional path of this is that you've had family holidays before maybe, and suddenly it's a big thing for your ex that the kids are going away without you. So what can you do to kind of, I guess, mitigate the concerns? Some really simple things: provide flight numbers, flight times, send a text when you land, here's where we're staying. Arrange to do FaceTime 2 or 3 times. It doesn't have to be all the time. I don't think every day is appropriate, but maybe twice during the holiday, so that the kids can report back to mum or dad and say, oh, we've done all this great stuff. It's brilliant. They can stay involved. And that sort of stuff, and being open to that is something that can be really reassuring, I think.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, I think that covers everything for our festive special and holidays and all sorts of things specific issue order related. So, Merry Christmas, which feels very odd saying that in September. And I hope you all managed to have a a Christmas that works for you and your new family, and it may be a completely different Christmas, but it can be a good one, and it can be a better one than it's been before. So all the best for the festive season.
Yeah, absolutely. Happy Christmas. And if you'd like any more information on our podcasts, head over to stowtalks.co.uk, and please don't forget to rate, like, share and review where you can.